online. Hello. Hi everyone. So thank you for joining us for this Ulex webinar tonight. This is our first time doing this. We're pretty excited. My name's Lindsay, and I work at the Ulex Project, and I work as a coordinator there and a trainer. And I'm really excited about this. We've got people from 11 different countries that have confirmed they're going to be a part of the webinar tonight, and we've had some really great questions coming in over the last 3 weeks. And with close to 100 people that are joining from across those 11 different countries, so that's pretty awesome. Do bear with us. It's our first webinar, so there might be some technical glitches, but we have done, this is our third test run. I do 4 fingers, which is a bit ominous. This is our third test run. Yeah, we're pretty confident that hopefully from this point forward, it will run quite smoothly. Before I go any further and give a little contextual framing, I'd like to just introduce the panel of the 3 people who have kindly agreed to join us, all of whom are trainers and facilitators, course designers, activists, organizers, amazings in their own right, and have worked with the Ulex Project and with our sister project with Eco Dharma. And I'm going to hand it over to them to do a little bit of an introduction about who they are. Ruth, would you start?
For sure, yeah. Thank you to Lindsay and to Ulex and to all of you for listening. It's lovely to be speaking about theatre of the oppressed. I'm an artist and a change maker and a facilitator. I'm based in Spain, in Madrid, but originally from the UK. And I've worked for the last 10 years around helping to shape spaces and to bring people together to explore how change happens. And so that's been my main inquiry, to look at how to create the context for change to happen. And I've done that within community settings mainly, but also with NGOs and with activist groups. And recently, more and more, my practice has been going back to my roots, training in theatre, and bringing theatre of the oppressed into that. Lindsay, you're muted.
I am. Thank you, Ruth. Jeroen, would you give us a little bit of information about who you are and why this interests you?
Sure. So I'm Jeroen from Labo. We are a movement for critical citizenship based in Belgium. I think I discovered Theatre of the Oppressed maybe like 8 years ago or something like that. I was already doing a lot with Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and I just found in Auguste Boal and his work, in his whole body of work, Theatre of the Oppressed, a very powerful tool. Groups, communities, individuals to work towards social change. And as a movement for critical citizenship, we work around a lot of issues from an intersectional analysis. And we just use basically Theatre of the Oppressed as one way to address what Freire calls reading the world. And by reading the world, also being able to just transform things, transform the world, having a rehearsal for reality.
Fantastic, thanks, Jeroen. Your sound is a little bit crackly from time to time. Like it kind of cleared up at the end, but just if you've got headphones or anything close by, it might be worth plugging those in. I don't know, it just got a little bit crackly for me. George.
Hiya, my name's George, based in London in the UK. I'm a part of a collective of socially conscious artists called Reboot The Roots. We work primarily to create social inclusion or social cohesion through the arts, whatever that might be. My particular interest in that is using Theatre of the Oppressed as a way of creating transformational spaces on personal and social levels. The last 10 years, I've been fortunate enough to work in numerous places across Europe and Southeast Asia with different groups, people in recovery, people with experience of homelessness, living with HIV, migration, statelessness issues, domestic violence, incredibly broad, but under the umbrella of they've experienced some kind of social exclusion, some kind of oppression, and we've worked to use arts only as a way to discuss that together and to explore options and experiences, but also as a foundation for organizing longer term structures, logistical events, and working to empower different groups, work with different groups to empower themselves, find solutions to our collective problems. Also involved quite a lot with direct action housing here in London, and very pleased to be here and be online with you all.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. What we'll be doing at the end of this webinar is sending out an email that will have some further resources and links to some of the projects and possibilities of ways to get involved with some of the projects that Ruth, Jeroen and Ruth are working on right now. And we welcome people who haven't made it to the webinar tonight, but who are watching this recording afterwards. If there's questions that come through or there's further information you'd like to ask, we'll include an email address in the YouTube clip as well. Please do drop us a line and get in touch. So the reason that we decided that our first webinar would be on Theatre of the Oppressed is because, one, it's proven to be one of the most popular trainings and courses within the arena of community organizing, activism, campaigning, but also because of the kind of the times that we find ourselves in with this kind of, great change, multiple complex problems and issues of great magnitudes, where there's a sense that there's great peril, but also great opportunity. And for the last 2 years, we've been offering these trainings and have witnessed what's come out of them, whether they're groups that have come together as a training that have then gone on into the world to kind of use it as a form of direct action, or to explore more kind of I think Boal talks about there's no blur between the political and the personal, and that kind of the inner work, the social and the personal as an arena for transformation, with Theatre of the Oppressed providing, tried and tested methodology and ways to be able to explore that. So since I'm just giving a little background here, but since Boal kind of developed this in the 1970s in Brazil, it's been used in countless different settings all over the world to build community, to challenge power structures, to explore new narratives, and to support people to realize their potential for personal transformation. Boal talked about how theatre is a form of knowledge which should also be a means of transforming society, which for me feels really exciting. It feels like what that brings, what that offers us at this time. I find that really exciting, a strong invitation, and something that's ever more relevant really with the complexities of what we're facing right now. So we've got a list of 7 or 8 different, we've kind of grouped the questions together into 7 or 8 different questions. And I'm gonna, I guess we kick off, if that's all right, you're in with the kind of first question. Let me just open my little sheet here. Which is this question, I'm going to suggest Jeroen opens, but then we go to all 3 of you, which is around what are some of the most effective ways that you've known Theatre of the Oppressed to be used across the world? And both in your own projects, but beyond that as well.
Yeah, I think there's some really great examples. And just to name a few, like from the history of Theatre of the Oppressed, which started like in the 60s, Boal worked just as Ferrer also did before and after, for instance, with landless peasants of the MST, which is the Brazilian landless peasants movement, where they really use this. And I've seen this been working out in documentaries, how they really documented how these peasants used it to address like landlords, address like the police, address a lot of people. How will we address these evictions? How can we do this and minimize the risk of damage that we have ourselves? So there is in India a huge movement. Jana Sanskriti is the name. And it started with, it really started, Jana Sanskriti, with, is the sound getting better? Or is it still, okay, better. So Jana Sanskriti is a big network of now, I think, more than 10,000 people in India doing this kind of work. And they went from village to village to work on the topics which cover the daily needs of people, of small peasants, of women, the strength is you really can use it on any possible topic, because it's a method to go and explore. And I have seen it myself and work with refugees, with vulnerable youth, with people in poverty, how small communities get there and they get a better knowledge of the issues they face, and because of the knowledge they can also develop through theater new strategies to address them. And that for me is a strength, that you can always adapt it to the context, you can adapt it to the struggle, to the people who are there, but it gives them some way of really getting a better understanding of their world, and because of that they can also better transform their world.
Great, thanks, Jeroen. That was great to hear. Ruth and George, do you have any other context that you'd like to talk about?
There's one group based here in London, which is the Cardboard Citizens, which is run by Adrian Jackson. They work with homeless and people with experience of homelessness. Adrian Jackson was a close friend and protege of Auguste Boal for many years. He's the translator of all of his books. And the process with Cardboard Citizens is very similar to a model that we used in Malaysia through drug rehab, which was using the regular theatre workshops as a way of creating not only spaces for people to share past oppressions, traumas, but also a regular structure to access other services. The rehearsal workshops built up into Forum Theatre, and the Forum Theatre is toured in the UK. Cardboard Citizens tour Forum Theatre around hostels. The actors are people with experience of homelessness, dialogue with persons experiencing homelessness at that time, and the same in Malaysia. We had people in recovery from drug addiction, people living with HIV, engaging in dialogue with people of sharing similar oppressions, but also in that country, really changing a lot of the stereotypes and a lot of the dehumanization they were facing. So I found it very effective working on the sort of personal level, the experience of the actors and the participants in workshops and performances, and then what happens on the social when you start to take that out into the world and into wider audiences.
Fantastic, thank you, George. And Ruth, do you have anything to add? I remember you were mentioning something about Senegal recently and the work that's happening there.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. Yeah, I've in December I was in Senegal training with or living and working with a group, the Ulex Theatre Company. They're based in Dakar in Senegal, and I just wanted to. I mean, there's so much that I can share from that experience, but I just wanted to kind of highlight one specific moment that was very powerful for me. That I thought this is really working. That this technique is really. It has a lot of power within it. So they had been touring a performance using image theatre mainly, and around fishing, because there's been a lot of conflict in coastal villages around people feeling like their fish had been taken, and there was much more fishing restrictions and a lot of conflict between villages. And so they were touring. They created a Theatre of the Oppressed performance, and they were touring it. And we were watching this performance and realized that the conflict was happening between the villages, and wasn't addressing the fact that there were huge European boats further out to sea that were taking the fish. They were taking more than 50% of Senegalese fish. And the Senegalese people, even the Senegalese people who had been researching and working on this fishing project, weren't aware that that was happening. So during this time while we were there, we shared with them some text from Greenpeace, and we worked on their particular performance and added in some newspaper theatre, taking in parts of this text. And now they're continuing to tour with elements of this international fishing. And the results have been quite astounding, because it's changed the dialogue and expanded the vision from just a local conflict to something much more global, which has a much wider remit. Yeah, so that in itself was very powerful, and the results from that are now being taken to governmental level. So I think that there was some quite astounding developments.
Wow, great potential and great possibility then to be used in a wide range of different contexts. One of the questions that has come in was around how Theatre of the Oppressed can fit into broader campaigning and activism strategies. I mean, I guess you've kind of touched into a little bit of that, Ruth, just with what you're saying. But yeah, again, I'm wondering about some personal experiences or broader experiences that you've heard of the tools and methodologies being used to affect change and empower across both, the personal and the political. Jeroen, would you have anything to feed back into that question? How it can fit into broader activism or campaigning strategies?
Well, at first, I think it is really a good tool to go and get a better understanding of the issue you're investigating. Because how often you're together with a group of people and you try to figure out what you're talking about, and you don't really understand each other, or you all have a very partial way of looking at the issue. And I really use a lot of, because in Theatre of the Oppressed, we often talk about Rainbow of Desire, Forum Theatre, those well-known techniques. But one of the very basic techniques, image theatre, is one I just use all the time and in all kind of contexts. And with this image theatre, for example, there is this very simple exercise like completing the image. And you start with a very simple image on a topic, and then you add more and more and more layers. And if you're with a group, for instance, of 30 people, there will be so many, because people, like, the image is also in the person who's watching it, who's seeing it, and then trying to interpret it, and then, oh, that's not right, I see it differently. So it's a great tool to really go and try to discuss deeper in topics and add different perspectives in a very open and constructive way. And in that way, I use it a lot when doing strategy work, campaigning work, trying to think about action strategies, but also really getting to understand our issue better. Because if we can agree amongst ourselves on the issue, if we only see some of the root causes, but not all of them, because we just look at it from our own perspective, then we can never come up with the strategies which really can come to the systemic change we want to see.
Yeah, great. Very interesting. I'm sitting here scribbling away notes at the same time. George or Ruth, do you have anything to feed into that that you might have seen, that you might want to add? If not, then just say no. We can go on to the next question.
I do. Yeah, I mean, one of the most exciting things that happens with Theatre of the Oppressed forum theatre sessions is that people should come away restless. People should come away almost agitated, kind of with lots of questions, not really satisfied with what's gone on, and wanting to go out into reality, into the world, and try and change something and do something different. So in terms of a broader campaign strategy, for me, it always motivates people to try and change something, to try and look at things differently and to break them out of the automatic patterns which we fall into very easily. So yeah, that can be targeted into specific campaigns or around specific questions, but just generally I find that restlessness and that hunger very exciting. Your own called it a rehearsal for reality. Another way that Boal talks about it is rehearsal for the revolution. And yeah, it's every workshop should be quite exciting in that sense of people come away a little bit upset about what happened, but in a good way.
Reclaiming agitation then. You're agitating right there, right? It feels, I mean, quite a few people that have written in and asked about questions or put questions forward are people that have done theatre of the oppressed trainings at various points, but feel a little bit kind of, yeah, not knowing how to bring that out, you know. So you've done this training, or you might have done several trainings, but then, you know, are struggling to kind of how best to use it, how to draw the rich conversations. Do any of you have any advice? I mean, you can just continue going on trainings forever and ever, can't you? So I'm wondering, what advice would you ensure that, such as you've just said, you're in meaningful reflection can come from the tools, come from image theatre, that would support people who are considering making a life out of this, you know, pursuing this as a life path? That question goes to.
I'll take it. And I think for me, as with everything in life, it's all about play. It's all about playing and just having a go. And as you know, there's that saying, you know, if we wait until we're experts in anything, then we'll die. You know, it's like I really believe, particularly like from reading Boal's work, he was evolving it all the time, always changing and adapting and playing with his. It was iterative, no? So he would have an experience, and then he would take in what. The new information that had come from that real experience, and then the material would change and he would try it differently the next time. And so I have that, you know, I'm a collaborator. I love taking on, not just collaborating with others, but collaborating between many different practices. So I'm not a purist at all with anything. So for me, with Theatre of the Oppressed, there's such rich and open games and methodologies that they're able to be applied alongside a whole host of different practices. So what I would suggest to begin to kind of work with these principles is just kind of weaving it into things that you're already doing, and then building it up a bit more and a bit more. And just and play with them, the games and
Fantastic.
That's my recommendation.
That sounds like a recommendation for life, really, doesn't it? More play. George or Jeroen, do you have anything to add to that? Any suggestions or furtherness, or is plays the way?
Yeah, what I would say, like, create for yourself a safe context to start. Also, I remember when I returned from my first training, I always thought, theater is just nothing for me, and I took this training just because it was close to pedagogy of the oppressed affrairy, so I just will give it a shot, but I don't think theater is anything for me. And I came back like this agitated and enthusiastic, and I really wanted to do something with it. But at the same time, I felt like, okay, what am I going to do? So I just called a few friends together, and the first kind of test rounds I gave myself. Give yourself this opportunity. I think it's a very powerful tool, but create a safe space and to go and after display, be curious. If it goes wrong, be curious. What happened? And just then accept this feedback, work together with people. And like, I would not advise anyone to, if it's your first TO event you will do ever, and you have never worked with refugees or any kind of vulnerable group either, to just combine it and go with it. But you grow into it. Just as sometimes it's an easy ground to work with a new group you don't know yet. It's very rich. and you can learn a lot of it, but it's an easy ground. The same with new things, and also if you fall and you fail, well, do it again, fail again, and fail better.
Fantastic. So make failure a part of your theatre of the oppressed journey. Yeah, I guess wrapped in with this question is also, what is the use of training? I mean, have you witnessed people that have come and, you know, for a lot of people, when they hear the word theatre, it's outside of their comfort zone just in that. Is it only drama students that you generally tend to come along to trainings? Or tell me, yeah, I'd be interested to know about who is this applicable for? Who might think it's not applicable for them, but then they come along and they benefit hugely from it. I'm wondering of those experiences too. Maybe you've got some, George.
Yeah, I've worked with groups of actors and groups of non-actors and mixtures of the two, and really ask question and how to sort of theatre and public speaking performing loaded words for many people, and some of the most terrifying things you can ask people to do. So as a joker or as someone responsible for people's well-being in a group, it is just really knowing your structures, knowing the different ways you can ease people into it. I mean, the games and exercises, I think people run for like Rainbow of Desire and Forum Theatre, but even the image theatre, if you go right back to just the games and exercises that allow people to play things together to get out of their cerebral context and experience each other. We have to remember that within all of the games they're a microcosm of the bigger ideas within theatre of the oppressed. So even what may seem to be a very simple movement sound exercise actually contains within it of the later stages or further stages of the tree. So for anyone, just like walking before you run and really savoring the simplicity of those stages beforehand, and that will allow people to access it. I mean, the idea is that we are all theatre essentially, so therefore we're all performing in some sense all the time, and really theatre of the oppressed is about allowing us to observe ourselves in action in order to choose our actions in the future more carefully.
Great, thank you. That was wonderful and very interesting to hear all three of your perspectives. Another question that's come through is around intersectionality, which is, a real buzzword that we're hearing a lot of right now. But yeah, and I'm wondering kind of how theatre of the oppressed can kind of support exploration of this kind of overlapping and independent systems of discrimination or disadvantage that actually, that exist in our organising structures, in our networks, in our family systems, in our relationships. And how we can, how in your experience as jokers or facilitators, have you had different people from different campaign backgrounds or different groups? Is theatre of the oppressed potentially a useful way to be able to bring people together that haven't been in the same room before, that might have different focuses or issues that they're focused on? Jeroen?
I can maybe just start, and then other people can chip in. Well, I think one of the things which I find important is the idea that we often learn to just use our this part of our body. People can see it like just our headspace, and we are very much in the rational debate and the rational discussion. Feelings, emotions, all kind of other expressions don't really get a place, and then also we got stuck in this like one issue way of looking at things, and that for me is why theatre of the oppressed is such a rich language. It's a different language, a language to address topics, and I think by putting people together and allowing them to show their own perspectives, allowing them to to express them with their body. Like this embodied learning can be so strong, and often what we really can't find common ground in words because we're all stuck to our own jargon and our own like ways of phrasing our lived experience. By showing these different lived experiences and then showing that often a lot of these oppressions have very similar power dynamics. And if we analyze them even further, they come from the same like root causes, the same forms of oppression, how patriarchy, how capitalism, how racism, xenophobia, how all of these are interconnected, homophobia, they're all so much connected. These oppressions are so similar that it only makes sense for us when we see this to also try to address them together. Because like Audre Lorde said, we can't fight single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives. And I think that's a really important idea. And I see it confirmed over and over again when I work with people on theory of the oppressed. Sometimes we are totally unaware of an issue. And then there's this one striking image which just shows us, wow, I wasn't aware of this oppression. It was one of my blind spots. And it's a great way to uncover a lot of these blind spots. And that's why I really believe it can be very instrumental to get to see the connections between our different struggles. And yeah, in that way, I really like to use it in intersectional work.
And have you witnessed that? Have you like had experience where you've seen different groups? You know, so I know that my inroad into activism was climate activism, and I was very kind of like, no, I'm just going to focus on this, and that'll be the only thing ever. You know, that I'm kind of, this is big enough. This is big enough as it is. But then, of course, as you unpack it and unpeel it, you realize it's not just that. It's like you said, it's a systemic kind of interweaving. And I'm wondering if any of you have had experience where you've seen different groups or organizations or very different people from very different kind of backgrounds come together, and how the tools have opened that up in interesting ways.
I might add one more thing on the specific thing, and then I really want to hear from Ruth or George. It's
Sure.
just like this idea I got with images are polysemic, which is a difficult word to say, that they have several meanings in them. And I've seen this several times in groups. You make one image and you ask people, what do you see? What's the story behind it? And they just bring up so different stories. And some people really can't see the story. What do they mean? No, it's something totally different. And then you go and dynamize the image. You add some words, you add sound, you add some movement. And then people say, wow, really? It could be a whole different story, a whole different. So a lot of worlds go open. And I've seen this with very different groups. For instance, when the topic you wanted to address was like racism, was like how refugees are being exploited and oppressed. And then all of a sudden, we have a discussion on sexism in the group, which some women brought up in the group, and which just show like the richness of the work, but also the complexity of the work we need to do. So that's one thing I concretely could see. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you, Arun. Ruth or George, do you have anything to add to that, or to respond to what Arun said? Ruth, can you hear me?
I was saying, George. Very briefly, I can share a project that I'm working on at the moment. That we are kind of at the preliminary stages of working, and we're creating a land-based project looking at livelihoods and regeneration. And with refugees in the south of Spain. It's a project that came out of the Eroles project this summer. And within that, we are going to be working with Theatre of the Oppressed tools, with people who are working at policy level, with people who have experienced being a refugee, with people who are currently in the system of being a refugee, with international activists, with local Spanish people who have never ventured out of their out of their region in the south of Spain, who are very kind of patriotic about their culture and the identity of the area that they're in. And our idea is not just using theatre of the oppressed, but using many methodologies, but over a long period of time, bringing these people together, not having conversations with them in separate rooms, but bringing these people together to look at the whole systemic picture, to look at everything that's happening, and through this repopulating a village. So it's, I mean, a huge project, and it will be for me, a really fascinating a fascinating kind of prototype, let's say, for how this kind of model of working with intersectionality can happen over a long period of time. But maybe in the next webinar, I can update you a bit more about how it's going. Yeah,
that would be great. It sounds very exciting. And
I can't wait to hear more about the Village project. That is very, very exciting. I just heard about it recently and have already booked my place in that village, I think. Similarly, well, we had one of our biggest projects, which was based on expanding from theatre of the oppressed to aesthetics of the oppressed. So the idea of how do we take the same principles oppressed and start to explore them through visual arts, through film, through the written word, through the way that we organize together. So we got together a group of around 30 different artists with experience of social exclusion from a very broad spectrum of different oppressions, experiences, however you want to define it, and organized an event around the idea of how would you do visual art for the visual, and how would you do a noise night for the deaf community. And it made me also realize that this webinar, as fantastic as it is inaccessible to anyone from the deaf community unless they can lip read particularly well. But the point being, it was interesting to see how across the board, running dialogue and conversations about were these experiences of having power or being having power used on them. And I guess that's how I would boil down no matter how diverse a group is, you will always start to find facilitated well how those conversations start to impact on one another, what the shared experience is through that.
We're going to type this up as a transcript now, aren't we? That's what's happening after this. It's going to be typed up as a transcript and put out so that it is accessible. I mean, it's a powerful point, because I mean, one of the questions that is on here is about how to specifically engage theatre of the oppressed with low-level English speakers. But also we have a colleague yesterday who was talking about how she'd worked, she'd used some of the techniques and tools with the deaf community, and particularly with mask within theatre of the oppressed. And there was total silence for 4 hours, right? She talked about how because it is non-verbal, and so much of our communication, or it can be, parts of it can be non-verbal. Yeah, a very, very powerful afternoon she told us about. I guess one of the things I'm wondering about is also when you're using it outside of practitioners, okay, so if you're wanting to bring it into an organization where there is conflict or there is aggression, or maybe this is something that you've been invited to do you have to do that covertly? Because surely if people who are socially anxious or self-conscious or introverted, if they feel like that, how do you bring people who are introverted into a space where they, to be seen by the rest of the group, to express themselves? Does the methodology support that kind of exploration? And also, as jokers, what's your specific role within that? I guess this question goes to, maybe George, if you feel like starting.
Again, just an awareness of the structures within structures. The idea that I always frame the sessions in terms of non-participation is always an option, which immediately for a lot of people, once they know they can opt out, it starts to alleviate. You make them very conscious of that choice. You kind of reveal the bare bones so they can always opt out, and then they're always provided with the opportunity to enter in or to step back, depending on what they want to do. Of certain, as we got introverted, or however you want to define people, be aware of the tyranny of the circle and the tyranny of the group. And I work a lot with just acknowledging that most of the interesting work that goes on in the room, it's all going to be subjective, and you as a facilitator may overhear bits, but creating lots of spaces for literal dialogue, letting people have time to talk to each other in pairs, in small groups, and then creating the option for people to talk as a whole group if they want it. But it's certainly one thing I see a lot of facilitators almost insisting that people have to address the entire group in order for it to have meaning. And again, that can be wonderful for some people, but for other people, completely unnecessary. 2 cents on how to do that.
That's helpful as an introvert. Does anybody else have any response to that question?
Yeah, I would just say already a while ago I stepped back from the idea when I engaged in a project with a group that there should be a specific product as a result, like a front theater piece or whatever. It's like, for me, the product is actually the process. And the process is the most important. And when we talk about emancipation, empowerment, collective liberation, however you want to call it, but the idea should be that people find there's something which strengthens them as individuals, as a group, as a community. And then, well, if something doesn't work for a group, then it doesn't work, and you do something different, and you just find something that helps for a group and for as many people as possible. And then, and the second thing is, people are different and have different needs, and it's a bit the problem with our formal education system. We have one kind of learning, and if that really works well for you, great. If it doesn't work well for you, you have a big problem. So I think there are different learning styles, and I think theater works. I've seen it work for a lot of people who would not have expected it, and then it's often you build it up with the games, and people get a bit tricked into it, and they don't even realize they're going to do theater, and then in the end, shit, I actually did theater. What happened? I never thought I would. Which is the thing that happened with myself, actually. So yeah, there are different ways to address it. But yeah, I really liked what George said. Like, it's really never push people into something. You give them an opportunity to go out of their comfort zone, because that is where the learning edge is. But you don't push them into their panic zone. Never.
Thanks, Jeroen. Ruth, I'm wondering if there's anything else that you want to add to that question.
I just wanted to share an experience of I was facilitating with a group. I was facilitating a leadership program with an NGO, and I was drawing on theatre of the oppressed tools, and also social presencing theatre, which is a strand of Theory U. And there was some people in the group who had expressed a kind of real desire to address their absolute terror, their fear of speaking or being seen in front of people. And so this was something that I was really focusing on with them. They were describing all the things that I have also in my life experienced, that being up on stage and totally blacking out, or getting clammy hands and like needing to go for a wee, and like not being able to speak, or when everything shuts down. And so we worked over the training was over a week, and we worked really slowly, and with a lot of beginning with sort of theatre of the oppressed games, and working in groups, working together, very sort of small partner to partner kind of storytelling, a lot of listening, hearing back your story being told by someone else, which is beautiful. And then there was one on the end afternoon. There was an offer that I offered for people to walk, so that everyone was sat as the audience, and the offer was that people would walk to the middle of the space, into the middle of the stage or the middle of the room, and turn and look directly at the audience, their peers, their colleagues, and just be themselves. Not say anything, not do anything, just be, not be a performer, but just be seen, just to be witnessed as themselves in life, and then to continue walking and sit back down. And it's a social presencing theatre tool, and it was, I didn't know if anyone would want to do it, if anyone would want to stand up to do it, and everyone in the room did. And for some people it was the most profound moment, because it was them being seen completely without having to perform, without having to find something clever to say, and it was one woman in particular said that she's reminded, this was in maybe 6 months ago, and recently she said that this moment triggered something in her to be able to have her feet on the floor and stand and to present in public, and to find a different part of being seen, to have an enjoyment with that. So although it's not theatre, I mean, it's a sense that we're all theatre constantly. And it is theatre, but it's not necessarily performing. So I guess it's that thing of, for me it was a very powerful moment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Very fertile and rich. We've got another 10 minutes or so before we wrap up. I guess one of the questions that I have of my own that's just arisen is around how you prevent theatre of the oppressed, or maybe it's not meant to be prevented, from going into therapy, because it feels like, it's both the personal and the political. So people are kind of acting from their own experience, kind of responding from their own experience. When I've been a part of trainings, it seems like it's a very delicate balance sometimes, where it's kind of being held in such a way by a joker or by a facilitator, so there isn't going into kind of core wounding, or maybe you disagree. Maybe sometimes some of the most powerful sessions that you've seen a part of have been exploring those edges. I wondered if anybody had any feedback around that, or any experiences around that. George?
Yeah, for me, it's very much connected with, people worry about triggering, and about how to hold spaces, or how to hold if like this trauma or these things out. And there is, as a joker, a tremendous amount of responsibility for creating these kind of spaces. I think there are ways to choose what they bring into those spaces, and this is, you go to image theatre, or you go to, people should be made aware that they are consciously choosing to enter into a certain memory, a certain emotional choice, and like every time I do workshops, when we move towards therapeutic qualities, or move towards people's real emotions coming out, my heart is in my throat. It doesn't mean that I think we shouldn't be exploring those spaces, and there isn't tremendous value in them. I keep pushing it back to questions, and to allow people to explore answers, and explore what it's like to maybe unblock these emotions with a group of near strangers, or in a public setting in a way that they've never done before. I don't want to provide even a kind of succinct answer to whether that's therapy or therapeutic, or it should be done or shouldn't, but for anyone interested in facilitating or participating in those spaces, if you're doing it right, you should be nervous about it. Real art should have this power to make us nervous, otherwise what are we doing all this for?
That sounds very sensible. Listen to your nervousness. If you're nervous about it, watch your gob. I mean, the last question that we've got on here, and it's perfect timing because we've got another 8 or so minutes, is it's quite a big question, and I'm wondering whether it's around how to not perpetuate the cycles of oppression in facilitating theatre of the oppressed workshops or in jokering. With the joker being, I guess, in a authoritative role, if that's how it's, how is that, what's your experience of that? How, and have you found yourself called out on that ever? And how's that been? How have you responded to that? Whoever wants to answer that juicy one, step right up.
Okay, it's a big question. And I think there are two parts. It's one in the role you have as a joker, but it's also within a group, and different things that can play within a group. And to give one experience I had was working with a young group of refugees, which they were youngsters, they were refugees, they had no legal documents, they were experiencing a lot of oppression, but I was seeing a very problematic like gender dynamic going on also within this group. And I think it's a big issue because I was also there invited to work around how can they take action around the topic of being refugees, about being undocumented. But I saw also other things going up, and I think it's a very big issue. It's a difficult thing, and in different contexts there are different ways to react. Like if you do a forum theater piece, where vulnerable people take up a role, and you have an audience with all middle class people who come and give very paternalistic advice or bring all their prejudices, well, you really have to intervene as a joker. You have to call it out, and often just by asking some questions, or just getting them on stage. Oh, you think that's the solution? Just come on stage, because the people who have the real lived experience will often show like this really doesn't work. It's because people bring a lot of what Boyle calls magical solutions, in which work perfectly in their mind, but not in the real world. So it can also be again uncovered, this kind of oppression. When you see it in a group, there are, like, I think one thing is you need to have some red lines where you can go beyond, and another thing is also seeing what is the appropriate way to, and that's really it's getting a bit dirty as well. Like there is no good answer. Like at that point, what did I do? I really voiced this as a way to support like the not dominant group. I just saw what I just mentioned what I saw. I brought it into the group, but it was not an issue I could solve at that moment, and there would not have been the opportunity because we had important work to do together. But I did want to address it and to put it forward as a question, and then maybe one part of this group, and it was also an invitation, like can work on this other issue if they want, because one of the things which Paul also and Freire both said, it's very hard to work around oppression, a specific type of oppression, with both the oppressed and the oppressors together in the same room. And the reason for that is very simple, that is things do get recycled and do get internal again. And we want collective liberation. We don't want the oppressed to become the new oppressors. But what we do want is to give the oppressed the chance to to empower themselves to take a lead and to liberate both the oppressors and themselves from the situation of oppression. Because often the oppressors can't see, and they can't do it, and they can't stop it.
Wow, powerful stuff. That's really, very powerful. I keep hearing this word over and over again, but it does feel with, kind of the systems of power, what we've witnessed in the last year across Europe and beyond with the States, that this ability to be able to challenge and bring to light the internal oppressor, as well as, the oppression that we can see around us. It feels like a very vital methodology and practice to bring into our structures and our organizing groups. Thank you to everybody who's listened in tonight. This will be broadcast, and we're going to put this out on our YouTube channel tonight, and then on our Facebook. So please feel free to share it with other people who you think might not have made it or would be interested in learning more. We're also going to be sending out some resources from George, Ruth, and Jeroen about some of the exciting, cool stuff that they've mentioned tonight and projects they're working on. Any more questions, please send them in. We welcome them, and we'll send them out to our team here to get a response. And also, if you're interested in doing a Theatre of the Oppressed course or learning more about it, then have a look at the Ulex Project and Ecodharma websites, where this crew of fantastic people are also doing various trainings throughout the year. I think that's it. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. Do you guys have anything else you need to say or wrap up, or any final words?
Just thank you to you, Lindsay, for holding a space, and to Ulex for providing this platform. Yeah, thank you.
Take care, you guys. We did it. It didn't cronk out. Take care. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.